This Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 1:30 p.m. local time in the Central Time Zone, we have the 4-5, 2-4 in Big Ten play Michigan State Spartans traveling to Champaign, Illinois to play the 6-3, 3-3 in Big Ten play Illinois Fighting Illini in Memorial Stadium. This game will be streamed on FS1, and the Illinois Fighting Illini opened up as a 3.5-point favorite. The line has trended down by about a point to Illinois minus 2.5. That's what the line currently is right now per ESPN Bet. And Illinois is given a 66.7% chance to win this game per ESPN's Football Power Index. This is a critical game for not just the immediate future, for the present. Illinois is bowl eligible, but they want to win out. They want to beat their remaining opponents, which are Michigan State, Rutgers, and Northwestern. Those are very winnable games. Illinois can go 9-3. If they go 9-3, and that includes a homecoming win this Saturday against Michigan State, they probably finish the season ranked. Maybe they can get to 10 wins in their bowl game, which for Illinois would be very much celebrated given their history. And much of their roster has remaining eligibility, so they could enter 2025 with high expectations internally and externally to maybe make a college football playoff run. I know that sounds weird, but with the expanded playoff and with how good Illinois has looked at times this season, it's possible, since the majority of their starting roster is made up of juniors who have an additional year. You look at Michigan State. They need 2 more wins to achieve bowl eligibility for the first time since 2021. And I think that that would be huge and a success for Michigan State in year 1 under new head coach Jonathan Smith, who I think is going to build Michigan State into a formidable force. A win here helps recruiting. It helps confidence internally that Michigan State can, come off a bye and win against a team who's favored over them, just like what they did against Iowa. Both of these teams, by the way, are coming off of a bye, so that's something fascinating to pay attention to. But not just for the immediate future of these programs, reaching bowl eligibility or finishing ranked in the case of Illinois, but down the road, a win here can, I think, create a snowball effect for both of these programs. And maybe if Illinois wins this game, we'll look at them in 2025 and say, yeah, their amazing 2025 run really started in this game where they beat Michigan State and then beat both Rutgers and Northwestern, or one of them after Michigan State. And then for the Spartans, maybe they improve in 2025 or 2026. They just get better and better every year. And this win and their wins over Purdue, which are very likely, and Rutgers at home, which is also likely, maybe that's where it all starts. So we're going to talk about this game. I'm going to give you my preview and prediction here, but before we get into that, I ask you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I know a lot of you watch this channel, a lot of you love this channel, and I appreciate your support, and I love you guys and interacting with you all. But I imagine that some of you are probably not subscribed just because you don't know if you're subscribed or not. So make sure to check, and if you aren't, hit that subscribe button. If you're new here, welcome. We are the best Big Ten football channel on YouTube, and thanks to your support, we are going to become the best college football channel on YouTube. We recently passed 20,000 subscribers. We will be doing a giveaway to celebrate that at the end of the regular season. Our new goal is 30,000 subscribers, so help us reach that by, again, hitting the subscribe button and also clicking that notification bell so that you can get notified when we release new content here on College Football with Sam. Like the video to give us a boost in the algorithm. Comment your preview and prediction down in the comment section below, any thoughts you have on the game, and join our Discord server via the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment so that you can talk college football 24/7 with the College Football with Sam community. And if you want to support the channel monetarily, you can donate via Super Chat down in the comment section below, or through links in the description and down below in the pinned comment. You can visit our Patreon page and Discord server and purchase merchandise or sign up as a paid member to support the channel monthly. Thank you very much, and let's get into the broad view of things, then we can dive into the details later. That's what we like to do here on College Football with Sam. We save the best, often the details, of course the prediction, for last. These two teams are Big Ten teams who are not toward the bottom. They are not Purdue. They're not Northwestern. Those are really the obvious teams that are toward the bottom of the chili pot in the Big Ten, especially Purdue. The tier list of the Big Ten, if you want to do it in broad terms where you don't have to put much thought into it, is at the top you have Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, and Indiana. Then you have everyone else, and then you have Purdue way at the bottom. That's kind of how it has been working this season in the Big Ten. Michigan State is viewed as 0.7 points worse than the average college football team per FPI. They're viewed as 4.5 points worse than the average college football team in S&P Plus, and they're viewed as 3.8 points better than the average college football team per My Potential Power Index, the PPI. Meanwhile, you look at Illinois, they're viewed as 3.2 points better than the average college football team per FPI, 2.4 points better than the average college football team per S&P Plus, and 4.3 points worse than the average college football team in potential power. FPI and S&P Plus measure all 134 FBS teams. Potential power only measures the Power 4 teams, of course, including Notre Dame, who's an independent but counted as basically a Power 4 team despite not being a full member of the Power 4 conference. Hopefully one day Notre Dame makes the decision to join the Big Ten or fully join a conference. I think that would make college football a bit more interesting. But anyway, that's a topic for a different video. These teams, I think, are in a pretty similar boat. Illinois has performed better thus far this season. I think that the Illini have done a very good job of winning close games, of beating the teams that they should beat, and maybe stealing away some wins too. Against Nebraska, remember, the Cornhuskers were pretty much in the lead and had the momentum for the first three quarters and for parts of the fourth quarter. And then Illinois hung around, they stayed in, and they won in overtime in Memorial Stadium when Nebraska was briefly ranked in the top 25 this year. Illinois, they got pounded by Penn State, they got blown out by Oregon, and they lost in a close one to Minnesota, which was their worst loss of the season. They also beat Kansas in the non-conference. They beat Michigan at home and really game-controlled Michigan, barely escaped against Purdue. This has been a team that's been up and down, and I think in late middle October they began to get worn out by the fact that their schedule was getting tougher, but they have good players that we'll talk about throughout this video, and I do think that they have an underrated staff. You look at Michigan State's faced a gauntlet of a schedule. Oregon, Ohio State, Indiana, top 5 teams. They played Michigan on the road in a rivalry game. Michigan's down this year, but still they have some talent. Iowa is, well, by power ratings, much better than they were last year, but they're not winning their close games. Instead, they're losing their close games this season. And they also played Boston College non-conference. They played Maryland on the road in week 2. They faced one of the toughest schedules in all of college football. The Michigan State Spartans have. So you see that here in the points per play margin, where Illinois by most power ratings is slightly better than Michigan State, but you check out the points per play margin. Michigan State is a negative 0.16 points per play margin. That means on a play-per-play basis, Michigan State is losing. Illinois is a 0.008 points per play margin, which basically means they're slightly above breaking even on a play-per-play basis in terms of points, not in terms of necessarily success rate. That's more what expected points added margin is, where Michigan State is underperforming their expected points added in general. And you can see that with how they have a pretty easy time driving in between the 20s, but they often fail to punch it in the red zone. As for Illinois, they slightly underperform their EPA, expected points added, and their expected points added margin as well, which is 0.048. Michigan State's EPA margin is 0.012, but they don't underperform it quite as badly as Michigan State does. And as for the Spartans, I can count multiple times against Iowa, times against Oregon, times against Ohio State, even against Michigan, where they got in the red zone or very close, and they failed to get any points out of it. And that is not how you win football games. Michigan State is a team that is very close in a lot of aspects to being perhaps a fringe top 25 team, but they're so inconsistent. There are other moments where they look nearly as bad as Purdue. So a very inconsistent team that they're 52nd in game control. They have the 13th toughest strength of schedule, so they're battle-tested, but the battles that they have fought often result in painful losses, both in terms of the actual games, but also in terms of personnel. Charles Brantley got knocked out of the Indiana game. Aiden Childs got knocked out. It sounds like Childs will be back for this game, which should provide optimism. I don't know about Brantley's status. Hopefully they're both okay and healing up. We should be praying for them. Illinois has faced a tough schedule too, though. 22nd, because they've played Penn State on the road, Oregon on the road, and they did get dominated in both of those games, especially by Oregon, but I think those are two top 5 teams, not by rankings. I think in a merit-based world where the College Football Playoff Committee ranks based off of merit, I'll talk about this later today when I release my College Football Playoff predictions, Penn State should not be ranked this high right now. Right now. I think that 4th may be a bit too high. But in terms of power ratings, I think Penn State's top 5. And Oregon, I think, in terms of power ratings, is number 1. And in a merit-based world, I think they are also number 1. I mean, Illinois has played a very tough strength of schedule here. They're 40th in game control. Game control is ranking all teams based off of how the average top 25 team would do with each team's schedule. And then, comparing that to how the team that is being compared to the average top 25 team has done with the schedule. So Illinois is viewed as better than Michigan State in game control. Only 39 teams would do better with Illinois' schedule than the Illini have. 51 teams would do better with Michigan State's schedule than the Spartans have per game control. The critical matchup in this game, I believe, is Michigan State's rushing offense against Illinois' defense. The Illini have struggled to stop the run for much of the season. They struggled mightily against Penn State, and that's how Penn State really game controlled them to death as they ran for over 200 yards. Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen looked awesome in that game. Oregon ran the ball effectively on them. Michigan at times ran the ball effectively on them. You look at, I think, Minnesota, who ran the football well on them, and Kansas. Kansas was gashing them on the ground. If not for those turnovers, Kansas probably wins the game via game control. The Illini, when you look at run defense this season, are allowing opponents to average 4.7 yards per carry, 9.9 opponent first downs per game, 168.1 opponent rushing yards per game, and 35.5 rushing attempts. 94th, 106th, 86th, and 71st in those categories, respectively. And in the pass defense, they're not much better, but they are better. 7.3 opponent yards per pass attempt, 64th, 11.6 opponent yards per completion, 52nd, 219.5 opponent passing yards per game, 61st, and opponents complete 63.33% of their passes on the Illini, 93rd. This defense, in part because of the strong strength of schedule, I think is a little underrated, but it is a defense that I am definitely selling my stock on as the season has progressed. It's become clearer and clearer and clearer to me that they have some good individual players. They're a better defense than what they had last season, but this is nowhere close to, let's say, the 2022 Illinois defense, which was one of the most legit units in all of college football that year. That Illinois defense is going to have to stop this Michigan State rushing attack, which by no means is this monster, because Michigan State has struggled to run the football. They're averaging 3.3 yards per carry, which is 118th, 110.1 rushing yards per game, which is 110th, and they're only attempting 33.6 rush attempts per game, which is 95th. Yeah, that's where the battle is. And I say that because Michigan State has success against Michigan early, for example, or against Iowa, who they could have beaten by multiple scores if they were able to convert their field goals into touchdowns. They ran the ball very successfully on both of those teams, and they did an okay job running the football on Maryland, an okay job running the football on Boston College at times. They did, I think, a good job running the football on Ohio State for the first few drives, but then Ohio State figured out the offense. Their depth came through. Their talent came through. This is a Michigan State rushing attack that has some potential. I think Nate Carter's a good running back. K'Ron Lynch-Adams is a good running back. But they're banged up on the offensive line. They're not where Jonathan Smith wants them to be on the offensive line. They're not performing at a high level. And on top of that, you add in injuries. And this is a very inconsistent rushing attack. Illinois has the better rushing attack. They average 3.8 yards per carry. They have 129.8 rushing yards per game. And Illinois' rushing defense is, well, it's kind of putrid. Michigan State only allows 4.1 opponent yards per carry. And again, they've played Indiana. They've played Michigan. They have played Ohio State. They've played Oregon. They've played Iowa. I mean, Caleb Johnson, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, Jordan James, Noah Whittington, Kalel Mullings, Tyson Lawton, Justice Ellison. They've played a lot of good running back rooms. I think Michigan State does have a respected rushing defense, and I do think that Illinois will have some struggles running on the Spartans. So that's why I have this as the critical matchup, is I don't know whether Michigan State's going to have success on the ground against Illinois or not. If they do, they probably win, or at least are in a good position to win. But if Illinois shuts down this rushing attack, and it has to be a complete Aiden Childs game against a secondary that has made some opportunistic plays, that has forced some turnovers, that I think is better than their defensive front, especially with how Michigan State's offensive line has been in terms of not just run blocking, which is not up to standard, but also in pass blocking, there are going to be issues, and this game could get out of hand. Illinois doesn't really snowball teams. They don't, but it could get out of hand in terms of feeling, like the Penn State-Illinois game was, where, yes, it was 14-7 Penn State in the third quarter, but you felt like it was over, and it was just inevitably going to lead to Penn State eventually winning this game. That's how it could be if Michigan State can't run the football, because Childs, he's too inconsistent, even against Indiana, where he had that basically perfect first quarter. After that, he imploded. He completely fell apart. He's not there yet. So this offense needs to be balanced. Illinois had issues running the football all season long, and even in games where they are outrushed, they have found ways to win. I can trust them to find a way to win and to be one-dimensional at times because of who Luke Altmaier is, the receivers that he has, and just his veterancy and his overall skill set. I can't exactly trust Michigan State to do that here, especially since it's on the road and their quarterback, and these two quarterbacks, and Altmaier and Childs, sort of run these offenses. Their pass offenses are both better than their rushing offenses. They're different. Childs is not a veteran. Childs has been more inconsistent. He turns over the football a lot more than Luke Altmaier does. Both are talented young men, talented quarterbacks, but that's the critical matchup here. It's Michigan State's rushing offense against an Illinois defense, especially Illinois rushing defense, that's been lackluster. Who comes to play? Who shows up? Let's check out both of these offenses and then move on to the defenses. Looking at these offenses here, let's start off with the quarterbacks. Aiden Childs has 1,850 passing yards, 8.1 yards per attempt, which is high. That's actually pretty impressive. He completes 61.6% of his throws. It's okay, maybe below average for a power quarterback, but doable because it's above 60%. 8 touchdowns. It's not where you want to be. 11 interceptions. That's not where you want to be. He has a 131.4 passer rating, and in quarterback efficiency, QBR, he has a 62.5 QBR, which is 57th. Luke Altmaier has 1,893 passing yards. He averages 7.6 yards per attempt, completes 62.8% of his passes. He has 16 passing touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He has a 66.2 QBR and a 145.1 passer rating. He's been sacked 27 times. Aiden Childs has been sacked 21 times. Now, Childs has been banged up more than Luke Altmaier has. Donovan Leary, Luke Altmaier's backup's only thrown 5 attempts. Tommy Schuster, Childs' backup, has thrown for 29 attempts. I think that when you look at both of these teams and how the offenses run through their quarterback, it explains a lot. Illinois' offense right now is better than Michigan State's. They score nearly a touchdown more per game, 23.5 points per game, 86, compared to Michigan State's 17.3, which is 125th. Illinois scores 0.357 points per play, 75th, to Michigan State's 0.263 points per play, 123rd. You look at total offense, Illinois is outside the top 75 in almost every category. They only average 5.2 yards per play, which is 88th, but that's better than Michigan State's 5.1, which is 95th. Illinois gains an average of 339.8 yards per game, and Michigan State only gains 332.9. And despite the fact that in yards per play and yards per game, these two teams are pretty close, there is quite some distance in the total points per game, and that is because Illinois does a better job of getting in the red zone and converting in the red zone. Illinois scores 2.5 offensive touchdowns per game compared to Michigan State's 1.6. They have 3.8 red zone trips per game, 50th, while Michigan State has 2.8. Illinois converts 83.33% of their red zone trips into scores, pardon me there. Michigan State only converts 72.73% of their red zone opportunities into scores. You see that in the fact that Aiden Childs has 8 touchdowns thrown. Luke Altmaier has double of that at 16. Michigan State has 9 rushing touchdowns and Illinois has 10. I mean, these rushing offenses, Illinois is better on a yards per carry basis by about 0.6 yards per carry when you factor in the 2 FCS games. In terms of rushing touchdowns, they only have 1 more. It's really these passing offenses here that I think make or break these teams. Michigan State can be more explosive through the air, but Childs has thrown 11 interceptions to Altmaier's 3, nearly 4 times the amount of interceptions here, and that is critical. It's cost Michigan State games against Boston College. I think it cost them an opportunity to make the game against Ohio State a little more competitive. It nearly cost them against Maryland, nearly cost them against Florida Atlantic. Luke Altmaier is not the problem at Illinois, in my opinion. He's not. I think he's one of the Big Ten's better QBs. I think that he is an underrated quarterback. He's much better than he was last year. Is he great? I don't know about that, but I do think that he's above average or at least good. Childs certainly has a lot to work on. I know we spent a lot of time talking about the quarterbacks, but again, I think they really run these offenses here because K'Ron Lynch-Adams leads Michigan State in rushing yards, but with only 469. He only averages 4.8 yards per carry with 2 rushing touchdowns. Nate Carter has 418 rushing yards, 4.4 yards per carry, and 3 rushing touchdowns. Childs has 170 rushing yards for 3 touchdowns. He averages 2.3 yards per carry. Altmaier has 148 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns for 1.9 yards per carry. So for both of these quarterbacks, pay attention to how these staffs utilize their rushing threat because they can pull it at any time and run. And especially Altmaier, I think, has this useful ability to scramble outside of the pocket to kind of be a little bit of a magician and find some yards on the ground when nothing is there through the air. You look through the air, speaking of which, and Illinois has Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin, who both have over 500 receiving yards. Bryant has 582. Franklin has 515. Bryant has 7 receiving touchdowns. Franklin has 2. And Colin Dixon, Hank Beatty, and Josh McCray are other players with at least 100 receiving yards, and McCray is a receiving touchdown. Michigan State's receiver core is a bit more diversified. Nick Marsh has 553 receiving yards. Monterey Foster Jr. has 453 receiving yards. 3 receiving touchdowns for Marsh, 2 for Foster Jr. Velling is 318 receiving yards. Isaiah Johnson has 193 and a touchdown. Glover has 158 and 2 touchdowns. Nate Carter is only 11 receiving yards away from being a running back with 100 receiving yards. So when I look at both of these teams, at the end of the day, I prefer Illinois' quarterback. With the injuries Michigan State has sustained on the offensive line and how their O-line is, it's exponentially collapsing. It's snowballing and not in a good way with the injuries and with its performance. I would take Illinois at tackle. I think guard is a little bit of an area that's a push. Wide receiver is a push. I would lean toward Illinois at wide receiver if you really had to push it, if you really had to. And I'd also lean them a little bit at guard, given how they've ran the ball more successfully between the tackles in recent weeks. I also think that Pat Bryant is probably the best receiver in both of these rooms, but Nick Marsh can certainly contend for that. And as for Michigan State, I think that Nate Carter and Kayron Lynch-Adams are better than Khalil Valentine, Aiden Lawry, and Josh McCray, because right now, Caden Fagan, who was their leading rusher for much of the season, is unfortunately hurt. So hopefully he can get back to the game. Hopefully he heals up and he's very healthy. But Illinois is dealing with some injuries at running back, like Michigan State's dealing with some injuries on the offensive line. I also would take Michigan State at tight end. And I think that Tanner Miller is a very underrated center, very good center. And I think if he had a better supporting cast and a better unit, this Michigan State offensive line would be, well, it'd be playing at a higher level right now. Let's check out the defenses, where I think Michigan State has a distinct advantage up front, but Illinois has an advantage in the defensive backfield. We already talked about these rushing defenses here. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the total defenses, the scoring defenses, and also the passing defenses of these two teams. I will give you a sneak peek. Special teams is going to be very important here because both of these teams are top 15 in field goals made per game. Illinois makes 1.8 field goals per game. Michigan State makes 1.9. And both are top 75 in field goal conversion percentage, which I know top 75 isn't exactly impressive, but that's about close to, not exactly, it'd be more like top 60 or top 65. It's close to being top half nationally in field goal conversions. And a lot of the better college football teams, especially this season, are not doing so well on special teams. They're not. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes when we get to special teams. But Michigan State's allowing 27.1 opponent points per game, which is 76th. Illinois is allowing 23.8 opponent points per game, which is 50th. Illinois is actually top 25 in opponent yards per point. Opponents have to gain 16.3 yards in them to score a single point. Michigan State's well outside the top 100 in that category. Opponents typically only have to gain 12.8 yards to score a single point. A lot of that has to do with Michigan State's turnovers, with the amount of interceptions Aiden Childs has thrown. Because if you throw picks, well, you typically give your opponents the ball in great field position. So therefore, they have to gain fewer yards to score points on you. Michigan State allows opponents to score 0.424 points per play. Illinois allows opponents to score 0.349 points per play. Michigan State allows opponents to average 5.4 yards per play. Illinois allows opponents to average 5.7. Michigan State's actually better in total defense, and they're top 20 in opponent plays per game, while Illinois is outside the top 50 there. It's very interesting. I think a lot of that has to do with the turnovers that Michigan State's offense gives, which puts their defense in a bad position. And there's also a good chance that, well, I think that Illinois has a better capability of playing bend but don't break, maybe, than Michigan State does. But just a few things to keep in mind. Michigan State has a 5.14 sack percentage, which is 90th. They have struggled to get pressure in Big Ten play. Illinois actually has a respectable 7.69 sack percentage, which is 30th. That's one of the strengths of this Illinois defense, is if they have an opportunity to, they will get to the quarterback. Illinois this season has 22 sacks. Michigan State only has 15. The Spartans have 12 passes defended, 8 interceptions, 3 forced fumbles. You can see in the passes defended and what they've allowed through the air that Michigan State's secondary is still tarnished from the Mel Tucker, Scotty Hazelton era. Illinois has 21 passes defended, 9 interceptions, 10 forced fumbles, 5 fumble recoveries. For Illinois, pay attention to Gabe Jacas, who has 6.5 sacks, leads the team there. Tayra Edwards and Dennis Briggs on the D-line, who each have 2.5 sacks. Jacas also has 3 forced fumbles. And in the defensive backfield for the Illini, pay attention to Xavier Scott, Miles Scott, Torrey Cox Jr., Matthew Bailey, and also Tyson Rooks, who's listed as a wide receiver but does have an interception. Mainly Xavier Scott and Miles Scott, who have a combined 5 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, 6 passes defended, and 1 sack. Deadly defensive back duo right there. As for the Spartans, pay attention on defense to Jordan Turner, to Nakai Martinez. Look at Ken Talley. Look at Jordan Turner, Chris Bogle, Anthony Jones. This is a defensive line that's better at stopping the run than getting to the quarterback. And I think that if healthy, like if Charles Brantley is healthy, for example, and I don't know if he is, let me see, is he out for the season? Because that injury did look pretty severe. Let me look that up briefly so I can inform you all about that. Let me see. Just taking a few minutes here, guys, to look at this. Looks like I can't really find much of anything. It seems like he could play against Illinois. He could not. So if he can play against Illinois, that would be pretty impactful because he's one of the better cornerbacks in the Big Ten. He's like the only bright spot in the secondary. 7 passes defended, 7 of the team's 12. He has over half of the team's passes defended, and he leads the team in interceptions with 3. So if he can play, pay attention to him on the defensive side of the ball for the Spartans. Illinois, I think, is better at special teams than the Spartans are. I believe that Michigan State's kicker in Jonathan Kim is more reliable, but I think Illinois does a better job at winning the field position battle, and they have a pretty reliable punter. And I just think Illinois overall right now is closer to being the standard Big Ten team. They're more of a Big Ten team than Michigan State is right now. I do think, though, that Michigan State's slightly better in the trenches. Both of these offensive lines are pretty bad. I don't know which offensive line I would take if I got to be honest with you, but I can say that in general, I think I would take Michigan State's defensive line. I think that Michigan State's D-line is as talented as Illinois' is. I think they've performed better in stopping the run. And while they have not had a ton of success getting to the quarterback, again, they've played a tougher strength of schedule. A lot of what Illinois does to get pressure is utilizing their linebackers, utilizing those to get to the QB. So I would take Michigan State slightly in the trenches, Illinois in special teams. When you look at coaching, I think that Michigan State has a better coaching staff than Illinois does, and I could be wrong here. I think that Michigan State has been pretty disappointing in the big picture this season. If they can get to a bowl game, my opinion on that will change, but as it stands right now, this is one of the worst teams in the Big Ten, and they could lose this game. If they lose this game, they drop to 4-6, and at that point they have to win out against Rutgers and Purdue to get to a bowl game. But I think Jonathan Smith is one of the country's better head coaches. I think he's built a very good offensive staff. I think the defensive staff is the area that may need some reworking to be done. And strength and conditioning, I think Michigan State is pretty set there. This team already is much tougher and more prepared for Big Ten play than the Michigan State Spartans of 2023 were. Illinois, though, they've been well coached this year, I think, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I like what Barry Looney Jr. has done with the resources that he has, and Brett Bielema has gotten Illinois to win enough close games to where they're going bowling, and they could be in a position to be ranked at the end of the regular season, and potentially at the end even higher if they do finish the regular season ranked of the season in general, if they do win their bowl game. Ultimately, though, I do think Michigan State wins here, and I'm picking Michigan State to win because of the staff edge they have, because they're coming off of a bye. I think they'll be healthier than they were against Indiana, and Indiana is one of the nation's best teams. So is Oregon. So is Ohio State. Michigan State's lost 5 games. 2 of them to Boston College, which Boston College is not a good team. Another to Michigan, who I think is a little bit better than Boston College. It was another road game. It was a rivalry game. Against Ohio State, though, and against Oregon, and against Indiana, Michigan State fared about as well as Illinois would have. These two teams, I think, are pretty similar in terms of their rosters. And when you add in the coaching staff, I do think Michigan State's actually the better team. That's why Potential Power is picking Michigan State to win this game by 5.1 points, even though it is on the road, mainly because of the staff advantage that Michigan State has. So my pick is that Michigan State wins. I think they cover. I think it will be a close game. I think Michigan State will win 27-21. Whether that means Illinois kicks 2 field goals and gets a touchdown and 2-point conversion or 3 total touchdowns, I don't know. I don't think Michigan State's defense is going to be one that consistently stops Illinois, though, or totally keeps them out of the end zone. Think of the Iowa game, where Iowa did not kick a single field goal in that game. They scored 3 touchdowns and just missed the 2-point conversion. This Michigan State defense can put together, I think, a good quarter or half of football where they look good, and then in the other quarters, they totally implode. Wouldn't shock me if there was a lot of inconsistency in this game, but I think that Michigan State with the higher field goal conversion percentage, and I think more importantly, having the superior staff, which is going to be amplified by coming off of a bye, is going to bring Michigan State to victory. So I'm picking them to win and cover over Illinois this weekend. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. Thanks to Crash2488, Brasco Rascal, Conrad OH for being Heisman members. Thanks to Chris Lane, Ismar, and Tyler Nye for being All-American members. And thanks to John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, Joshua Jorgensen, and Will Loftus for being all-conference members. Have a great day, everyone. Make sure to check out my merchandise store, Patreon page, and Discord server via the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment. See you all soon. Go Illini, and go Spartans. See you soon.